Hi guys, it's Raymond Wood at the Raymond Wood podcast. Thank you for joining us online, whether you're listening to Spotify, on Apple or through our socials. If you're very lucky enough to be watching this through YouTube, you get to see us when we're coming live from. So we're very fortunate to be coming live today from the home of Bolton Wanderers Stadium, we are very lucky to be an international partner at Euro Football Star. And we've got a professional coach with us, and Danny Clarke's been with us a couple of times before. How are you, Danny?
Very good, thanks, Ray. Yourself?
Yeah, very well. Thanks for joining us, Danny. Now, for those that do know Danny, but for those who don't know Danny, we'll do a very little bit of a brief explaining. But Danny's been involved in professional football for many years, and I might get Danny just to do a very quick small intro for a minute.
Yeah, so I've been working in the game now for over 10 years, within academy football now over 8 years, and now finished my UEFA licence, currently on the process of completing my Advanced Youth Award, and just trying to enhance myself further in the game to be able to develop the footballers that I work with.
Brilliant. And also, I know from our previous conversations, you've not only worked in the UK, but you've worked in a few countries overseas, including Australia as well.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate to travel around the world with the role that I hold at the professional football club, which has allowed me to go to India, Australia, South Africa, Colombia, Nigeria, America. The list is quite endless in regards to being able to see different cultures and different players with different philosophies.
It's amazing. I always get a lot of parents reaching out to us saying, how do you get a job coaching? Because it seems like a good gig. But I said, if you actually understood how much work goes in and getting your badges and your certificates, it's not an easy process, eh?
It's a long journey. It's took me probably 8 to 12 years, I'd say, to get to the part where I'm at now. But I think before I even got my UEFA B licence, you can't work within an academy before that, which you know yourself. So yeah. I think once I retained my UEFA B, I wanted to gain a bit of experience in that, and luckily enough managed to go into working in 11v11 football and get my UEFA licence.
Amazing, amazing. Now, we've got Danny on with us today on the podcast because we've had him before for some small interviews, but for everyone who's currently on our professional player pathway, and also for anyone who's thinking of joining us, we're actually going to talk about the 6 key pillars. And we thought it'd just be valuable to get someone with Danny's insight, his experience and his qualifications and level of knowledge, and someone who's currently working in the pro game at the moment in the UK. So we thought we'd discuss through for the next 25 to 30 minutes on this small podcast, just on some of the benefits that we offer within our program from the remotely based program, but linking it back into the pro game in the UK, but also through our professional player pathway. We also open up opportunities for college opportunities in the US, whether it's at an NCAA 1 college or 2 or 3. So just why some of these pillars are invaluable and just to see how it links back in. So one of the big things we do, and we'll get this one out the way, because I didn't really used to like this one when I worked back in the UK, because it was always put onto us as coaches, but we were like, it's not really relevant to us. But when we talk about, like, we do what's called intolerance testing and DNA testing. So we send a hair sample off to a lab in Australia for the players who are based there, wherever they're located on the planet. That will then actually check for intolerances in a player's system. So whether they can or can't eat bread, could be certain fruits, could be veggies, legumes, certain meats. And then from that result, we then build the perfect nutrition plan for the player. In regards to your experience, not just the club that you're at now, but even like through the FA model, is especially in the pro game, is nutrition a key part, or is it still not a key part? How is it taken in the pro game in the UK?
I think the nutrition side and the supplements that the players are having now are vital in regards to the game and where it's developed to. I think we talk about past experiences and players from maybe the 90s. I think it was well renowned that I think Arsene Wenger brought it in with Arsenal and the nutrition that players were taking. And I think it's really important that players understand what they're putting into the body and how they're benefiting from that, whether that be recovery. I think after a match, it's a key time where any of the nutrients you've lost or the elements that are going to help you recover or be prepared to train in plus 48 hours, you get a certain time frame to supply them back into your body. And it's massive now within the game. I think most professional football clubs will have a first team chef and he will log how much carbohydrates, proteins, fats, these key energy sources and to the individual as well, and bespoke diets to them.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I was so glad you touched on Arsene Wenger because I recently read his book and it spoke about like when he first went into Arsenal and some of the things he changed, even like down to like light bulbs, and he literally changed everything about the club. But I thought it was really interesting about the nutrition, and he really changed it from not just being about the fuel for the body, but also about the recovery process as well. So is there any that you've seen out there in clubland around the UK, or do you hear of any ones who are the real pinnacles of this, apart from like Arsene Wenger or Arsenal? Is there any?
I don't have any knowledge of any clubs that are doing it in a different way. I think each club will have either a sponsorship or a dealership with someone that supplies the supplements in regards to the shakes at the end of it to get it back into the body as fast as possible. That's why you'll start to see shakes at professional levels. They'll get labelled up for the players individually so that they know which one each player's having in their requirements. But I don't think there's anybody different. I think it was back in the day, Sam Allardyce back at Bolton was very big on analysis and data recording. So I think what they found was the distances that players were covering, and it's only getting further and bigger in regards to what these players are now getting out in the actual match output. Yeah. And I think that's a big part to the nutrition that they're having and allowing them to push to them new levels.
Yeah, and it's so interesting. Like we just spent a week or so with some of our players who were trialling at Stephen Gerrard's academy, the private academy, which I think you were aware of. But even down to them, they've recently just hired the chef who not only worked at Liverpool for many years, but also worked at Everton at Finch Farm. And they identified a year or so ago within their programme, they needed to up their game as well. So they've actually gone and hired this chef, and I've seen some of the meals going on, and I'm like, I wouldn't mind actually eating a bit of this food. So it's really good to see the level that goes in, and the reason why we added it into the professional player pathway, because we knew it was super important. One, if the body's being fueled correctly, and also it was all around that recovery. And it actually went back to when you come and visited us last year, and we were having a chat at dinner one night, and it was realising that we used to put a lot of barriers in with our programme, going, well, we can't really have a world-class nutrition system for kids in Australia because we're not really a pro club. And I thought that was just a poor excuse. So we went away after you went back home, and we decided to put that into place. And we're very fortunate now that with this intolerance test, we actually know what fuel their bodies like and don't like, and then we can then get a nutritionist to then build the plan for them.
I think that's really, really good what you've done there, Ray, and it's unique to the players that are coming onto that and gaining that experience. But the biggest thing that any individual's got to realise is it's ownership. We can give them all the tools to become the next best player they can be, but then it's having that resilience and the dedication and the motivation to stay stuck to a diet plan, and that's the biggest one. It's ownership on it. So like we can create the meals, the chefs can put on what they can, but they've got to load that plate. They've got to know what they're putting into their body, and they've got to know when to do that. And it's just like everything else in life regarding sleep and hydration. We can't make them. It's down to them, but it's how much do you want it?
Yeah.
And how much are you prepared to give up and sacrifice, even if it's something that you go, actually, I'm not quite enjoying this one. It might be that little bit that gives you that bit more the next day. And don't worry, there'll be a day where you get a cheat meal or you get to have something a little bit more you enjoy, but it's little sacrifices for the big games.
Yeah, that's amazing. So that's one of our pillars. One of our next pillars, and you're paramount with and you're aware of as well, is match analysis. So again, this come from a couple of years ago when we first bought an international group, actually 2 Bolton Wanderers, and we seen some of the magic that was going on at Bolton. And it then brought that same headache, was like, we always have barriers in the way in Australia that we can't do match analysis properly, and we were putting too many roadblocks. We then discovered that, one, we could get match analysis because pretty much everyone has a device and has got a phone in the hand. And even if it's a low-level video, you can still get some invaluable data from that match analysis. So what we done was, and you're aware of, we then do 2 match analysis in the longevity of the programme. We will then get the games analysed in Portugal by VO Stats. We then get them sent back to the office in Brisbane in Australia. We then send the rest of it to our professional coaches on the grounds in the UK, who then overanalyze the game. And then the idea behind it is we're looking for the coaches to then draw out objectives for players to work on. So having a touch point and to explain to our followers and viewers back in Australia and in the US and the Middle East the importance of match analysis at the clubs you've worked at, and have you touched on it over the years and how involved you get with match analysis?
Absolutely, really important for players to gain a good understanding of where they're at. And this might not just be to enhance their game, but this might be to critique it in regards to adding that little bit of detail to fine tune the key elements of the game. So if that's a midfielder linking the ball between the defensive line and the attacking line, how is he doing that? When's he doing that? Where? Well, sometimes there's nothing better than being able to show it them do it themselves, because we can coach, we can do demonstrations, we can set scenarios that might be game realistic, but there's nothing more realistic than seeing it actually happen in a game scenario. Yeah. So I think an analysis tool is fantastic in regards to letting the player watch back what they're doing. And most footballers will like to look and see how they can get better and what they've done well. And there'll be some areas of the game that you go, do you know what? Fantastic, they do that really well. But there'll be little areas that we can turn around and go, well, this is really good how you've done it, but even better if. And I think that's what the match analysis is there for, is never just accept an okay standard, always look to get better. And I think that's why we try to do that. And it's been around for quite a while now. And it's everything covered from distance to successful dribbles, interceptions, shots on target. And I think seeing that part of your game, you might find that the analysis is based out of possession, because really in possession you might retain the ball quite well, or you might create attacks really well, depending on what position your roles and responsibilities are. But it gives you a chance to break down your game and just get that little edge on other players that aren't doing it for their game.
Would you one day like to be a professional football player? Would you like to be part of our pro player pathway? What is the pro player pathway? It's an opportunity for all Australian football players aged between 10 and 23 who want to join us to become the next professional football player. On the pro player pathway, you get to join me and my team free of charge to an event all around Australia. When you join me, we're going to teach you the secrets of football in Europe. And one day, maybe, you could be gracing the Champions League final. Guys, over the next 12 months, we're going to be coming around all the major cities of Australia. And when we come around all the major cities, we're going to be running our free events everywhere we go. So guys, what have you got to lose? Nothing. It's a free event. It's for boys and girls aged 10 to 23. And I'm going to teach you the secrets of becoming a top European football player. Oh, and one final thing. We're going to be giving away 20 scholarships to join me on this program of a lifetime.
One of the big things that we discovered, and we thought we hit another brick wall, but obviously for you, you're privileged to work with the real elite and top level players in England. And those guys probably only need the icing on the cake. They need that real high level match analysis. What we discovered in the likes of Australia and the US with some of our players on our program was that they were actually missing probably the 90% key fundamentals of football. So basic things like basic distribution, basic scanning, looking at long range passing, look how to create spaces. So that was really, it brought it back into us that we realised that a lot of these players don't have the key fundamentals to play football to a high enough level. It was a good thing for us to discover, because we then realised actually what you use match analysis for in the programme in England, it's probably a little bit different than what we use it for, because where they're not being taught the key fundamental basics, we can pick this up in the match analysis and then get them on that programme with the objectives to make sure they're working on it. So going back to you, again, that's something that you think is definitely valuable for players, even if rather than expecting to get a high level detail of a match analysis, just sometimes being told the basics. Do you think that's okay? And do you find that with some of your players, you still have to tell them the basics sometimes?
Listen, football can be a very simple game. We can either complicate it as coaches, or the players can overcomplicate it by sometimes doing too much. And being able to revert it back to a video clip and a match analysis and going, here are the pictures, these are the scenarios. I think we do go back to the basics, because it's good that players can be reiterated. There's no wrong way of sending that message back to them. But more often than not, it will depend on the team and the player and the philosophy that's in that team, whether it's the playing style, the shape, the formation. Are players getting pulled out of position when they're out of possession? So if you're working with the elite teams, you're more often than not finding patterns of play or a scenario to try and break down the opposition you're playing against. I think depending on what level you're playing at, it's a key tool for individuals. So a lot of ours can be done for set plays. So whether we're doing zonal or man marking, but regards to individual key areas, yeah, we'll break it down and go to roles and responsibilities, position specific. So we might show scenarios for the team, but then we can clip that down right down to the individual and go, this is how we get that scenario for the team via you coming in and picking up a pocket of space or being able to play in between the lines to allow us to play that next pass. And there's all these, again, this will break down to each individual, to each manager they play for and the playing style and philosophy, and then maybe the system that they play and the shape. But it's how you use this tool of analysis and go, this is going to make me better, and why is it making you better for the bigger picture is for your team. So yes, we've got to do it for the individual on specific basic scenarios, but then it's going to lead to a bigger picture.
A bigger picture. And I'm so happy you spoke about that position specific, because I think when I go back to 2010 and I started doing my high level badges and I'd done my UEFA B here at Bolton, it really amazed me once that position specific training started coming out, but then also a lot of that individual analysis started coming out. And we noticed, and you've probably been privy to as well over the past 5 or 6 years, that how quick players accelerate once they get that individual feedback and get those individual objectives. Now, following on from match analysis, our next pillar is the football plan. We realised a couple of years ago when we built this professional player pathway programme for players outside of the UK and Europe who maybe want to play in a college team in the US or maybe aspire to be a pro player, but we thought we need a place where we hold all of the information for the players. We've just gone through the process over the past couple of months of building an online portal with all the information, things like your intolerance results, your nutrition plans, your DNA test. But the big thing was coming out of the match analysis. You as a coach could do a match analysis for some of our players as an example, or anyone could do it in the UK who's qualified. It drives out them objectives, but it's how the player is then able to keep track of them objectives and how we can keep track of the player. So within the portal, what we've done is, as an example, if the priority one is scanning before they receive the ball, we record that bit of information within the portal. The players are accountable to record that information in. So firstly, they've got to watch the game back themselves, record the amount of times they do or don't scan before they receive the ball. Then they put those numbers in. It's a good way for them to chart and graph to see if they're getting better at it, but also it helps us to ascertain that information as well. So firing that one back to yourself and thinking of the elite game and the pro game in the UK and England, is that something that you guys currently work on? Do players get like individual learning objectives or ILPs, I think they were called when I worked it, and how do you ensure they get done at the pro game level?
No, absolutely. I think it's really important that these players get time during their training week to work on what we would call the individual learning plan, so ILPs. Now, more often than not, we try and break them off into position specific, so defenders working with defenders, but sometimes you've got to link them with the attackers, because it might be defending 1v1 but attackers working on hold-up play. So there's nothing better than linking an attacker against the defender and finding them scenarios of the pitches that they're going to see in a game. So how long you can dedicate your time to is depending on how much contact time you're going to get with the players throughout the week, because they've also got to get a good understanding of decision making in tight and compact areas. They've got to get through basics of passing, receiving, but over both feet. I think the biggest one is we will do passing patterns, and it's usually a one-directional passing practice. Yeah. We've got to make sure that can go both ways, so that players are competent enough to be able to play with both feet. So knowing how much time you're going to spend with your players throughout the week to prepare them for the game day, you've got to allocate an area of that, but you can't underload it so they're not getting success at their ILPs. But then it's also carrying them ILPs to go, actually, there'll be scenarios and pitches and opportunities to develop that in decision-making practices or tight and compact areas, whether that's you creating a phase of play or a function. There will be then pitches to go, actually, can we reiterate what you've learnt in your ILP? And that might not mean stopping the session for the whole group. It might be just pulling that player out and going, do you know what? We've actually just covered that 30, 40 minutes ago or 2 or 3 days ago. What did you do well? What were we working on? Okay, can you go and put it in that same practice? So what you're taking there is an individual learning plan, but trying to make the player carry it out throughout the week so that when it comes to game day, he's not forgetting about it. It's actually gone from you working on it as a sole focus to now you implementing it into the game.
Brilliant. So those ILPs, if I remember right, when I was back in the UK, and I'm pretty sure you guys will still do it now, do they then form part of that player review and that end of season review and the mid-season review and things like that? How often do they get put in?
Yeah, so depending on what phase the players are working at, usually foundation phase 9 to 12, you're working on a 12-week review. But with the youth phase, which is 13 to 16, you're starting to get a little bit more intense and absorb a lot more information and be able to learn it and kick on a bit faster. So they'll get it every 6 weeks. So when we sit down with your reviews, sometimes them reviews will stay as they are because you can't set a new goal until you've achieved your last one or actually acknowledge that you're actually getting better at that area. So I think that's the worst thing we can do as coaches is turn around and go, okay, well, we've worked on this, great, but we've not had success from it, and we move on to another challenge because we're not doing justice for the player in regards to making them better in that area, because you might find that these players, they've got something in the locker. How do we get it out of them? What are they good at? And how do we use that to the best that we can? But then sometimes these areas that we're setting as individual learning plans, we don't want to just get the weakest area of the game and go, we need to make that better, because that might grow as the strength becomes stronger. We can't neglect that. We've got to make sure that we find a good balance and we go, actually, this is developing his weaker part of the game, but we're also going to keep enhancing the strength that he's got because we know that that's an asset and a tool.
Yeah, that's amazing. One of the things that we touch on, we identified 5 key fundamental areas for players on our remotely based program. One of them is world-class passing or long-range distribution, as we call it. And again, you've just touched on that, and I'm so glad you did. It's important for parents and players to understand that. The chances are you're not going to achieve that objective until you've gone past puberty, potentially because of the strength required, the strength in the glutes to fire to be able to kick it that far. But also it was really important that you touched on one of the things that we get a lot. We'll get parents contacting us on the program, and this is something new for them, but their son might be on a short range distribution pass completion as an example. And we've had parents reach out to us and go, our son's been on this for 3 weeks, when can he move off it? And we're trying to explain that he's currently, or she's only currently sat at 42%. Now we try and drive our standards to be 85% or above. Once they ascertain 3 of them in a calendar year, then that means that they've completed that particular objective. It's not something we want them to forget, but it's something that we just want to make sure they tick off. So in regards to going back from an objective point of view, is there a level within the academy systems in the UK that you look for as a benchmark to see things like pass completion and some of those basic fundamentals? What would you look for as a player? Are we looking at 70%, 80, 90?
I wouldn't put a percentage on it in the foundation phase on the basis that kids are going to make mistakes and they're allowed to make mistakes. It's more so the reaction of the mistake in regards to how do they go and win the ball back? What's the tactical understanding? Do they do that same mistake again? Are they learning? What's their understanding of the game in regards to? Sometimes we've got to set them up into scenarios where they are going to make mistakes and gain an understanding of losing or failure or getting something wrong, which is fine. So we don't want to put pressure on them in regards to numbers in the 9s to 12s. I think, like you said, when you're going into that growth period and things become a little bit more serious for these players going into the youth phase, well, I won't want to put percentages on for the clubs because each club will work to a different system, different philosophy, different understanding of what they want for individuals. Because I think when you look at the elite game, as ruthless as it is to develop the player, the percentages are to get through to make it as a pro, it gets harder as the pyramid gets towards the top. But if we're going to base it on how these players are being successful, well, it comes down to the game.
Yeah.
Training, the retention of the ball, again, they're allowed to make the mistakes, they're allowed to get things wrong as long as we show an understanding of learning from that. So when it comes to the game, yeah, we are looking at the players giving the ball away more than 50%. There's something wrong. And it might not just be that, how often does that happen for that player? It might be a one-off game. Well, then there might be something psychological in that we have to look at. Is there anything away from the game that's affecting his mindset to give the ball away? I think we've got to look into the bigger picture than just going, oh, this player's having a really bad day. Knowing what that player is capable of is really important. And then if it's something that actually, do you know what, the player's struggling with, decision making early, or you say scanning before, I like to say, can they do it before, during and after the balls travel? Because it just creates little snapshots of how they can make the decision quicker, but then understand what to do next when that ball gets moved back, whether it's a combination of a 1-2, whether it's opening the pitch up to get it out into a switch. So having these percentages, yes, it's good for us as coaches to be able to set a goal for the players, but in regards to game scenarios, the only time you're starting to question it is if they're giving it away more than 60-65%, because then you know that they're not looking after the ball very well.
We very fortunate to watch a game yesterday. We watched the Bournemouth-Liverpool game, and McAllister, who plays for Liverpool, the Argentinian player, and his pass completion was 91% in that game. And we were just like, that's the level. Like, that's the dream if you can get to that level. But to ascertain 91% in a Premier League game against a team, I think Bournemouth at that point had only lost 1 in 8 games. Like, it was pretty impressive.
I think the biggest one you've got to look at that is you've just name dropped a World Cup winner.
Yeah.
He's a World Cup winner for a reason. He plays in a squad that's got elite players from 1 to 11, and you're right. Look at the percentage against a good organised Bournemouth team. I think McAllister's a fantastic footballer. He's got a brilliant understanding of the game, depending on even a holding 6 or whether he's playing in an 8 and a more advanced position. I think he's just very, very game intelligent. But you're right, the levels are up there, and he was probably one of the best players in the middle of the park, dictating how and when Liverpool created opportunities to go forward and sitting in that front of that back four linking. But again, you're talking about a World Cup winner playing at 91% ball retention.
That's the aim and the goal. I wouldn't mind getting there myself. Now the next one, and this is quite a big one. We recently partnered with Stat Sports, who are our GPS provider, and I wanted to just touch on with you not just your experience at your current club you're at, but your feeling for GPS trackers. I know they've been out there for a long time now. We went out there and we done our own investigations on the top 3 or 4 GPS trackers. For us, we discovered that they were the best. We recorded the stats and data side by side. We had people wear trackers from other companies, and we compared. I also spoke to a good friend of mine at PSG in France, and they actually ironically went through the same process 12 months ago, and they found that Stat Sports come out on top. The reason why we added GPS trackers in to the one of the pillars of our program was for 2 reasons. One, we wanted to make players accountable. So we didn't want them to be relying on mum or dad or as us as coaches. So then every session they do on the football pitch, if it's an outdoor pitch, they wear the tracker. But also on our program, we challenge them to wear them on things like recovery runs, if they're going out to do a run, if they're playing something like touch football or whatever it may be. If they're outdoors and they're doing a physical activity, the more data we find, the better that we understand the player, but also the load. So our first touch point is accountability. Are you finding in the UK that's a very similar thing that makes players accountable rather than relying on mum and dads?
Absolutely, and I found that going all the way through the game. It's been around the professional level for many years now, the data recording in regards to GPS tracking on players, but it's filtering down right to semi-professional football now. I was playing last season, semi-professional at Ashton Town, and we would wear the GPS tracking vests, and we'd get sent our stats following Monday. So we play on the Saturday, Monday we receive our stats, and we kind of knew what week we were in for. And what it meant was there was no hiding place. You were accountable for understanding your recovery runs, your intents on a press, depending on how the manager set us up and how he wanted us to play. But you were kind of shamed into it as well, because you could see the stats of the other players. And when you could see players, again, this depending on the position you played, but if we saw a left winger putting more high intensity sprints to get to the byline, to create crosses, to recover back and help the team get behind the ball, you put a question on the other winger, and it makes you be accountable. And I think the biggest one is, like you said, knowing when you've got that logged in all the physical activities you do, it gives you a better chance to see how your growth becomes in regards to your physical fitness. How much is it developing over the period of time? Is it decreasing in regards because you're doing too much? Are you getting injured because you're overloading? I think it's a great tool to be able to analyse and understand how hard a player's working, how often they're picking up injuries, and how much they can be pushed in the future to increase them levels.
Hey everyone, we are coming around every major city in Australia over the next 12 months. We have got free objective football testing going on, guys. It's for boys and girls aged 10 all the way through to 18 years of age. The objective testing is quite simple. We'll put you through our 6 tests and I'll give you your results: physical, technical and tactical. And also, we're going to choose 16 winners to join us on an all expenses paid trip to Europe in 2024 and also 2025. Guys, what have you got to lose? Nothing. It's free to sign up. You get free objective testing and you'll get a free feedback, and maybe you'll be joining me at the Santiago Bernabeu in 2024 or 25.
Yeah, it was so important that it's only something new to Australia in the past maybe 2 to 3 years, especially in the game of football. And I think it was really paramount to us to make the players accountable, not to be relying on mum and dad all the time. One of the beautiful things is, like nowadays with devices and phones, players get their stats straight away. Also, we managed to get a great partnership going with StatSports, where our data automatically feeds to our online portal. So they've got all that data and information in one place. And as you just said there as well, it's showing us with the load. That was one of the big things I remember back at Leicester, going back in like 2012, 2013. I think it was Nigel Pearson at the time. They could actually predict with the sports science team if a player was on the verge of a breakdown or an injury, because they'd see the drop in the stats. Yeah. And they'd have the conversation with the player: is everything all right? Yeah, why? Just your stats have dropped off. And then they realised the load was getting too much. So to be able again to offer this to our players, it's an invaluable tool. Now the next one, and our final pillar we're going to talk about before we finish off, is all around trials. Now we open up trials for our players, whether it be they are players who just love the game of football and would love an opportunity to live in the UK or in Europe with a big focus on education and academics. And we've said we've got a great partnership with some private academies, and one of them is Stephen Gerrard's Academy. And they do a great education model. The players get to live the dream of playing football in the UK and get to experience. I think they've got 7 UEFA A licensed coaches at the academy. So for them to be able to do that's amazing. We've also been very fortunate to have some of our players come through the programme and go on and sign agreements with clubs like Liverpool. But I think for this one to finish off, as a professional coach, who's one of the highest qualified coaches, if not in the land, but in the planet as well, with the UEFA quals you hold, what would be your advice to players coming to the UK or Europe, whether they're coming for an opportunity for education and football's added on, or it is for the few and the minority who are really hoping to kick on and play pro? What would be like 2 or 3 of the key bits of information that you would look for as a coach in a player to make it?
I think when it comes down to players travelling to England or the UK, it depends on the background of the individual. Parents, I think the biggest one now is a lot of players will come over for the education scheme and scholar to kind of gain an understanding and a level of what we are over here in England. When I say that, players can be outstanding in Australia and be very, very good footballers here. I'm not disputing that, but you don't know what you're competing with or against until you actually see what your levels are here or in that squad. And we've witnessed that a couple of times, Ray. And I think the players having an understanding, one, the physicalities and demands of the game here. I think with everything that's going on in the world, in the the football world in regards to the Saudi Football League and the attraction that that has, whether that be the value of the money or whether that be the superstars that are going playing there. I think the one thing we're very fortunate of is in England, it attracts the best, which has been happening for many years. Obviously, we have the Premier League, but even if you talk about the Championship, League One, League Two, the standard of players that are coming and are capable to play technically with both feet, I think that's a good one to be able to start with. But being able to pass various distances, various techniques, receive under pressure with understanding of how to make a decision quickly, but problem solve, because they're the key players, they're the clever players that we can go, actually, we can put them in this tight area, this scenario, and we know that we're going to retain or have success or find a way of calculating a way through the opposition. So one is a player travelling into England, they've got to understand the tempo of the game. The tempo is so quick. And to do that, you've not just been able to perform it physically, you've got to have a good tactical understanding to allow you to perform these actions quickly in regards to your thought process and going, actually, this is the scenario and this is the pitch I'm in. We try and do a lot of pitch geography, so we'll set up our practices in relation to where the players will be in the game, and we do that all the way through the ages in relation to giving the players the ideas, but where they would be based in a game on a pitch. So pitch geography is good for us. So the players coming over, understanding the tempo and the physical demand of that, both physically but then mentally, because also there's challenges here. Yeah. Everyone wants your shirt. Everybody wants to be better than the player that's in front of them, and that's a great taste to have in regards to knowing that it's competitive, but it can also set a challenge to players. Yeah. So you've got to be mentally strong. You can't expect it to be given straight away. It's got to be something that you can work hard physically and mentally at. And then it's the background of the play. I mean, knowing that they come over here and go, actually, sometimes players expect it. That pyramid is tighter at the top, and when you get to the top, it's not forgiven even. You've got to maintain that level consistently. And that's the hardest part of, I would say, the game here, is being able to perform consistently. It's all right being able to show you've done this in one game, or you're capable of doing this in small patches. The best players are the ones that can do it week in, week out, not just in matches, but in training as well, because that's where you get selected.
How much do you think it's important to have the right attitude off the park, but also on the park? Is that something that you take into?
Absolutely. It's not just how you represent yourself on the pitch now. I think the big part of that, and we cover that quite a bit when we go onto these courses, where the psychology of players, how do they portray themselves off the pitch, because that's a part of the game. They'll have individuals, they'll have kids looking up to try and role models, set the example for them. And we've talked about players that can be a fantastic role model, but then you'll see players that don't go on and kick on to be the players that they're capable of being, because they get mixed up into the wrong crowd, or they don't portray themselves in the right way off the pitch. And it's so important with the right attitude, because it kind of breaks us right back down to the very first point of nutrition. So if players don't have the right attitude to eat the right foods, to train at the right times, to take on the right water and hydrate the body to allow them to perform to the top level, to even sleeping. I mean, the amount of times you'll have discussions with young players now that are playing consoles till silly o'clock in the morning, and then it's affecting the mindset when they're waking up early to either go to school for education or coming to the gates of training. I think listen, I'm not saying that they can't play on a console. That's part of the childhood if they want to go and play a game, but having the attitude to go, right, that's my hour, or there's my 90 minutes, that's me done with today's game, I'm going to go and do a physical activity, or I forgot my physical activity in. Attitude is a big part of being able to know whether you can push on further.
A final one to finish on before we finish off with this episode and it was really interesting, this one. We get a lot of players who might be given an opportunity at a private academy, or we've even had in the past, I've seen players who've had opportunities at some bigger clubs, but then they've been loaned off or sent down to a lower club and got told they need to go down to that level to develop more and then maybe push up. And I think a great example and analogy of this was a player I seen probably a couple of years ago now, who was on loan at Bolton Wanderers, was Conor Bradley. And then to see him yesterday make his Premier League debut for Liverpool in the Premier League and not even look out of place. I mean, is that again comes down to the psychology and the mentality of someone like Conor obviously signing for Liverpool when he was younger, but then getting loaned out to Bolton, where some people might see that, with all due respects to Bolton, they're a huge club, but obviously not where Liverpool are at the moment. But do you find that, again, it comes down to that attitude and psychology to be able to go, this is actually in the interest of my development and it's the best for me to get to the top? Where have you seen examples of players who've taken it the wrong way and not used it as a springboard?
It's a tough one, really, because again, it comes down to, it doesn't just come down to the individual on that one. Actually, it comes down to the clubs that are creating the partnerships in the loan, to be trusted with a player of a value that they know long term is going to be an asset to that club. And then it comes down to how much minutes, game time, are the player going to be supplied with. You see it quite a lot that players will be recalled if the parent club don't think that they're getting enough minutes to enhance their development. But if you talk about experiences in a player like Conor, fantastic since being recalled back into Liverpool, but again shown what he was capable of when out on loan, with the minutes that he was actually rewarded with, but then also the trust that he had with the club and the management to be able to take him to that level of enhancing his game to become a footballer for Liverpool, which he has now over the last couple of games. And I think that's testament to everybody involved in that deal. But yeah, there's other clubs and players that might go to not fruition in regards to that, for an example, where players might go on loan, it doesn't work out, and that might be down to the individual's attitude. It might be down to the club that they go to, what players in front of them, are they capable of being better than them and showing that the maturity when not being selected, when the time comes, can they show that they're going to benefit being part of that team?
Yeah, I think you covered it. It comes back to the, I think, testament to Bolton as well, like the work that they've obviously done with them over that loan period of time. Because as you know, it's not easy. It's easy just to leave a player at that level, but to try and get him prepared and prep for that next opportunity if and when he did go back to Liverpool. And I think you said it covers both parts. It's a testament to both clubs, and I think again it's partnerships and work. And the reason why I wanted to finish on that one, because we're saying to some of our players on our pro player pathway that making it as a pro mightn't be where you end up, but it's also understanding that sometimes there's other opportunities within the game, whether it be as a coach, whether it be as a sports scientist, a physio, a nutritionalist, but also there may be times in life where you get an opportunity and it might be a really lower level opportunity or slightly one peg down, but I think it's about grabbing that opportunity and making the most of it. So one final one to finish on. So for you, what's your year looking like over the next 12 months before we finish? Have you got much planned for the year with your coaching and any more coaching quals to add to this?
Yeah, so I'm currently be based back up at St George's Park next month to complete another area of the AYA, which I'm really enjoying. It's quite a different insight to the previous qualifications that I've took.
So for those that don't know what St George's Park is, it's the home.
Yeah, it's the home of the national football team. So it's where England will go pre-camp, training camps, pre-tournaments. So when the players are getting selected and you see them going up to there, we're based at St George's Park, which is a fantastic facility. It's what we call the home of football. And what we'll do there is that coaches from other clubs will get together, kind of sit round in a classroom and talk about experiences we've got, whether that be physical part of the sessions, whether it's the psychological parts of the sessions, not just what we're working with players on the pitch, but then scenarios that we might have to deal with as coaches and leads in regards to off the pitch. So it's great to get together. It's great to see what other clubs are doing and how they work. But I think for me, it's growth in my knowledge and making sure that I'm more adept and have a better understanding of the game depending on what corner it is. And yeah, the Advanced Youth Awards allowing me to do that. We've just covered a psychological block, which was gaining the mindset of how we deal with scenarios with specific individuals, and it was that's my gain for the remainder of the year, is looking to complete that. and like every day, trying to be on the pitch as much as possible to work with the players that I can try and make that little bit better.
Brilliant. Well, a big thank you, mate, for joining us on the podcast. And guys, everyone who's listening to the Rainbow podcast, will be coming back soon in the next week or so with our next episode. A big thank you from me, from Danny Clarke, and also a big thank you to Bolton Wanderers for helping us out, allowing us to film here today. It's been an amazing day, and we thank you for joining us, and we'll be in touch from the Rainbow podcast in the next couple of weeks.